Mhm. All right. I'm going to launch top secret new project. It's not top secret really, but I haven't told anyone exactly. So the next plugin in the loudness series is going to be an equalizer, but it's has some new concepts that fit it into the whole loudness series concept. So you have right here, obviously, a spectrum. I call it a spectral histogram because the way that this drawing is actually happening is using the same sort of histogram that the loudness series has, except now it's happening in the frequency domain. And the data for the buckets is coming from a short-term Fourier transform currently. And there will be other sources in the future, but that's currently what I'm working with right now. And the idea is there's a couple things this plugin is going to do. First feature will be to actually be able to use the K-weighting filter from the compressor from the meter, which is part of LUFS. It's going to be able to take that filter and just apply it directly as an equalizer. So it'll be sort of like a parametric EQ with the specific coefficients for the K-weighting filter that's used in LUFS. So that's sort of was like the first feature, first main idea behind the EQ. But then also, instead of just applying the K-weighting filter, you'll be able to use a parametric EQ in the plugin, adjust all the coefficients yourself, and each of those coefficients can be weighted by the K-weighting ratios. So it's in sort of an EQ on an EQ, with the purpose being it will then feel more natural when you make 3 dB of change in the low end, and then you make 3 dB of change in the upper end. They'll feel proportionally more in line with how you perceive loudness. So it'll, I think, it sort of improve your ability to intuitively make changes across the spectrum. So that's one aspect of this new equalizer. So it has like two different dimensions to the K-weighting filter, and then also it's a parametric EQ. But I'm going to take it further, and so the original reason why I added LUFS support to a compressor was pretty straightforward. Going through the history of compression, you had often peak rectifier driven compressors and RMS driven compressors where you take a certain small window size, and it just made enormous sense to me from day one to just extend RMS to also support LUFS, because the whole industry moved towards LUFS to measure broadcast standard how loud is something. And it's completely industry standard and ubiquitous. You're targeting LUFS all the time. A compressor is made to adjust volume, so why would you not drive it with the metric that you're solving for in the end? It actually drove me kind of crazy how much it makes sense, and then nobody had done it. So, but the K-weighting used by LUFS is sort of an imperfect representation of how loudness actually varies across the frequency spectrum. And there's more precision you can get using something called, for example, Fletcher-Munson equal loudness contours. And that's basically just a much more detailed set of filter coefficients. So since you're no longer necessarily targeting LUFS specifically when you're using an EQ, it made sense. I'm going to add support for that higher resolution equal loudness contour to the EQ. And since I'll be doing that, so that will be part of, just like I described how the K-weight filter will be used in the EQ, so also can Fletcher-Munson curve and potentially other equal loudness contours. But having added that to the equalizer, so that code is all there, all this wonderful code here. Not here specifically, this is the histogram code, but that can then be ported right over into the compressor. So I think most likely, I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do this, but you'll basically have a new loudness type for the Fletcher-Munson curve. So if you're targeting LUFS, you might not want to use that. But if you're just looking for even more transparent compression or more correlated with the perception of loudness, then you can use those more detailed curves. So it should ultimately have more transparent sound, just sort of like a better version of what it already is. So yeah, that's like the broad strokes of what I'm working on right now with the equalizer, and then how that's going to tie back in, because I want to keep growing the compressor and the optimizer. So that will be added to the optimizer as well, and the loudness meter probably, and the limiter. So they'll all just continue to feed into each other like that. But anyway, with the EQ itself, you can switch between channel split. So each of these is actually, each vertical up and down are different channels. And right now I'm using a mono mic, so you can't really, they just look symmetric. But you have a channel linked mode, so you have more different shape to display there. And you can select individual channels. So if you've got like Atmos or something like that, you can use the EQ across those too. It's got different scales, linear scale. You can hold the spectrum, so it'll continue to measure over time and leave an imprint. And I'll probably do some sort of a peak hold along with, so you can kind of combine those two. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work yet. And you also have a note scale, so you can see what octave frequencies you're dealing with. And all the usual, having different panels is going to be there. You can actually flip the display in case you want to see vertical orientation. That has all the different scale types. I think the target, so right now I don't have this coded out, but I believe probably the target will end up being probably a display of the actual K-weighting filter that you're applying. So whatever you configured the parametric EQ for, or if you boost the K-weighting filter, or the Fletcher-Munson curves or anything like that, that will be drawn over here so they can see your input coming in, what EQ shape you're applying, and then what the output looks like. That's most likely how that's going to pan out. But a lot of this I'm still designing, so not 100% sure. The spectrum drives through the history, the bucket size stuff, and the history length. So you can tweak all that stuff. You can make it super responsive, like too responsive to the point that it's kind of worthless. Or do something more like the default, which is a little bit longer of a window. I think Ableton uses like 60 milliseconds or something like that. And I think it's FFT is a little bigger. But all that's adjustable in here. And all these different windowing functions, which I'm sure has a purpose, but I haven't really... Yeah, I need to come up with like specific tests for those probably. But their windowing functions are pretty simple, and I mean, it works just perfectly fine with the no windowing function, which is what rect is. But it's the resolution sort of gets a little sloppy. What did I do there? Yeah, you see the low end in particular doesn't. Hand's pretty typical. Anyway, just a little introduction to the next plugin. I don't know how long it's going to take to implement this thing. Everything always takes longer than you expect. I think it'll be probably a couple months. A couple months before the first version comes out, maybe. All right, that's all I got for now.